I'm glad we're talking about the future, putting it center stage. I hang out in the future a lot, and I think we should all do it more often. Think back to what made you decide to show up for the future today. The answer is going to be different for everyone. For me, I owe Chewbacca and Snow White for my being here. Now, I don't know what brought you here, but let it be clear that each and every one of us is living proof of the diversity of motivations and approaches for engaging with the future. And this is why, really, we're not just here for the future, but we're here for all our futures. The plural is crucial, futures. It's also part of the identity of my field of inquiry, future studies. You don't hear it, but the S is there. Futures studies. Still, for all the plurality of our concepts of the future, we do have something in common, and that's our futures awareness. I know you have it, or you wouldn't even have been here. Your futures awareness is possible because every single human being has the innate capacity for foresight and anticipation. We use it every day, even for simple things like crossing the street or bringing an umbrella when the weather forecast announces a rainy day. We also use it in more complex situations, navigating our complex, chaotic, and contradictory present. We have to rely on our capacity and our skills for thinking about different futures. We need to hone those skills, individually and collectively, and not just for better planning and preparedness, in other words, for the future itself, and certainly not to impose today's ideas on tomorrow. Thinking about all our futures is important for the now. I first really got this thanks to Professor Reed Reiner of the Northern Arizona University. It was for my very first postdoctoral research project. My partner in life and work, I like to refer to him as a time-traveling photographer, my partner and I were traveling around the world on our recumbent bicycles. You know, feet first, laid back. We interviewed hundreds of people about their hopes and fears of the future. And this included several futurists who I'm now glad to call my colleagues. Among them, anthropologist Reed Reiner. He was organizing a class for which he'd take his students into a mud. Not all of you will know this by now ancient online tool, MUD, M-U-D, multi-user dungeon. It's a text-based, chatroom-like environment for role-playing all kinds of adventures. It's the year 2001, so it's pretty clunky, just a blinking cursor at the command line. So the year assignment, this professor said, was to simulate inside a dedicated mud the first human settlement of the planet Mars. The students were well organized and they held to strict protocol, like they thought, it seems, that any pioneer settler would. As the time for liftoff and permanent departure from Earth approached, the tension and excitement in the group was tangible. They were taking this very seriously. I had the pleasure of being with them for their launch. Inside the mud, everybody suited up, body checked, and took their posts. The imaginary doctors, pilots, biologists, psychologists, teachers, and engineers. Then countdown began. 10, 9, 8, co-pilot sneeze. 6, 5, 4. I puzzled over that command line sneeze for years afterwards. I finally got it, and so will you. Later on, this amazing professor dedicated a whole day to his interview with us. And in it, he made one of the most direct and accessible explanations of why and how our concepts of the future matter so much to the present. This is what he said. Any decision you make is based on your images of the future, on what you expect is going to happen. And if your images of the future are fuzzy and incoherent, then your decisions will be fuzzy and incoherent. If you accept his reasoning, you'll want to zoom in on the future and for a high resolution and consistent image of the future. But how is that even possible? That's where Snow White comes in, and Sleeping Beauty too. These fairy tale princesses, strong women, overcoming adversity and sleeping for 100 years, inspired me even as a preschooler. I wasn't so interested in their crowns or their gowns, and at that age I couldn't care less about the prince, forget about his kiss. But imagine waking up to the future after 100 years of sleep. Now that's an interesting concept. Waking up to the world a whole century later, for us, that would be the year 2120. What might that be like? What would we find there? What might we see? Can you picture it? Maybe not. There's not much to go on, just a date. It's not as easy as bringing your umbrella for a rainy day, right? In reality, of course, we can't fast forward to the world of tomorrow with an app and see it for ourselves. As a matter of fact, it's a challenge to even know where to look. Where would you point if I asked you to point at the future? This may seem like an impossible question, but it's more practical than you might imagine, as I learned from a British Sign Language interpreter on a long train ride through Holland. I'm in the habit of talking to anybody who crosses my path about, well, the future. And I asked this sign language interpreter about words for tomorrow, next year, and beyond. And we even talked about grammatical tenses for a while. Then when I inquired about the variations in sign languages from different nations, he lit up. And he began to tell me how only a few days ago, a conversation with a Brazilian colleague of his had got very complicated. He had wanted to meet up with this colleague the next day. As the two were making arrangements, the Brazilian confirmed that they'd meet yesterday. After several attempts to insist the meeting would be tomorrow, the British interpreter found what was going on. In British Sign Language, all signs for situating events in the future point forward. We have future, and tomorrow, and later. And correspondingly, there's the past, and yesterday, and before. This is not the case in some Brazilian sign languages, where the future is actually behind us. Surprising, isn't it? What happens is this. We think of ourselves as making our way to the future, as moving through time. That puts the future where we're heading. In other words, in front of us. We talk about foresight and looking forward. And therefore, that seems about right. So now, it's also possible to think of ourselves as simply being in the present, where you'll agree, we always are. In that case, we are still. We're not moving at all, and it's time that's actually moving. Let me show you. I am here, and time is going forward. In that case, the future is behind me, and as time flows, slowly but surely, the future becomes the present, where I am. And then as time continues to flow, the present, slowly but surely, becomes the past, where I can see it right in front of me. That's the passing of time. Understanding that we can't go to the future for empirical observation like Snow White, and we can also not see it from our vantage point in the present. It may seem like our images of the future are doomed to remain fuzzy and incoherent. Fortunately, we can actually create our own images of the future and do it well. Questions about how we zoom in on the future, how we construct our images of the future, how we use them and abuse them, are the purview of the field of future studies. This is the beating heart of my practice. Remember my time-traveling partner? So he's a photographer, and his mission is to shoot the future. A challenge he overcomes by asking others, our interviewees and workshop participants, to direct his gaze. We even developed an order form for commissioning specific images of the future from him. This month's special is a 50-year time horizon. That's the year 2070. Our form helps you detail what precisely we might see in a photo from a future. You can fill in boxes to suggest what environments, creatures, technologies, objects, structures, activities, and atmospheres you would include in your picture from the future. Once these specifications are given, Bram finds the right occasion and the right location to take the actual picture. As you can see in the image behind me, these pictures are then shown on a present-day surface that distorts them, not beyond recognition, but enough to suggest that the present affects our images of the future, and vice versa. The result is also always a series of images, because when it comes to the future, there never is just one answer. We aren't simply on course towards one single future. There are endless possibilities. And that's not to say that anything is possible. Some of these possibilities may seem more plausible than others, and you'll find some preferable over others. What seems most probable may never come to happen, and so it's best not to stop at a baseline future. And that's another reason for the plural, futures. We can look at multiple possibilities. We have all we need to do so. With our capacity for foresight, we can activate our futures awareness, and on top of that, build our future skills. The easiest way to start with all this is to begin talking about the future, just like I did 20 years ago. You can do this at any level of proficiency, and you can start in your own context. You will find that your conversation partners will help you appreciate the diversity of perspectives and approaches, and they will encourage you to think in multiples. What's more, you will be able to add their images of the future to your portfolio, just like my partner does when he uses the inputs of others to find and create his own visualizations of different futures. As you build your skill and expand the set of images of the future at your disposal in the present, make sure these images feel real. Provide rich texture. Think of concrete details, like the ones on our order form. And don't forget to include the awkwardness of our reality, even if it's just by inserting a sneeze during countdown. Now you know what that was for. Finally, by talking about futures, by sharing images of the future, you won't just be building your own skill, but also the skills of people around you. You'll help spread those skills more widely throughout our cultures, and so build the foundations for collective foresight and anticipation. It will help us navigate our challenging present with respect for each other and the differences between us. It will help us keep the future open and fill the present with potential. It'll be liberating, waking up to the future.